Hey, what's going on, good people? This is Gardner Douglas, and guess what? I'm your Oyster Ninja. This week we had a great week, talking to different people, meeting different people, a lot of holiday parties. 'Tis the season, is all I can say. I cannot complain. I get to go out every day and spread my joy, spread my passion on to other people. So I love it. Again, another great week for the podcast also. Keep those downloads coming. Thank you for all the support. Appreciate you. This week I got my buddy Scott, aka Big Shucker, on the show. He's our Shucker Spotlight for this month. We worked together at Rappahanock Oyster Bar in DC, and now he's representing Fanny Bay Oyster. So this episode is like so informative, it's crazy. I didn't know how knowledgeable and smart, not to call him dumb, but like he just blew my mind. I learned so much from him in this episode. He got it going on. So I hope that you get the same out of it and hopefully more. And let me know what you think. Give me some feedback. Again, my email is oysterninjapc@gmail.com. And of course, we're on the Instagram doing it, Oyster Ninja Podcast. But I'm not going to hold you up. Hope you enjoy this episode. And again, let me know what you think.
My name's Scotty Bordignon. I'm a shucker for Fanny Bay Oyster Company right now. I'm on Instagram as Big Shucker. Trying to sort of just increase awareness about oysters and try to debunk some of the preconceived notions that people have about oysters. So from Vancouver, British Columbia, moved to Philly for school, and then down to D.C., where I started shucking for Rappahanock, and moved back home and been shucking ever since. So that's pretty much my story with oysters in a nutshell.
Cool. So when did you learn how to shuck?
So I learned how to shuck, it was Thanksgiving 2013, I believe. Thanksgiving 2013, I was at a friend's house in DC, and they were friends with Kevin Kelly and Melissa Butts down at Rappahanock in Charleston now. They came over. We were having a friend's Thanksgiving, and they said, "Hey, Scotty, you want to learn how to shuck?" I said, "Yeah, why not?" And I had if nothing else, another tool for the tool belt. And so I started shucking. I did about a dozen. Taught me how to shuck. A year went by. Kept in touch the entire time, always visiting them at the restaurant, and they said, we brought some oysters again, let's see what you remember. So I apparently did all right, to the point where they said, "Hey, stop on by, talk to our guys, and maybe we can find a space for you." And then it became one of those things where it developed into a full-blown passion of me trying to not only learn as much about the oysters, but become a better shucker, try to be the fastest, cleanest guy, and which is always nice, shucking with the teams that I've been on, shucking with the shuck teams that I've been with is, we're all meatheads, so let's try to we're all competitive, we're all former athletes of some sort or have that kind of drive, so let's have fun with it and have some mini competitions throughout the entire time, and that's sort of what drew me to this, as well as the great flavor that is the oyster.
Man, that's cool. That's real cool. So, as far as like just shucking in Philly, DC versus where you're at now, are there any big differences, like as far as just raw bar culture?
Yeah, so there's a couple different things that are going on. First of all, it's a little trickier over here to just shuck the oysters. We're dealing with the Pacific species, and they have those nice fluted shells. So me coming from the Chesapeake, where I'm a stabber, It's I get a little bit more finger cut when I stab through because they have those nice little crinkles throughout the entire shell. So that's the biggest thing I think for when we're talking about shucking with shuckers is it's a different way of doing it unless you're a hinge shucker, and there's still ins and outs of that too. But the stabbing isn't always the easiest to do with these oysters. In terms of culture, over here there's a good culture. There's a great culture surrounding oysters. People are very interested. But people sort of take them for granted because we're in the Pacific Northwest. It's one of the great places for oysters to come out of. And because we've had them so readily available for so long, it's I don't want to say it's an everyday cuisine, but it's something that I think is fairly readily available. And we're starting to build a culture over here like what's over in Washington, D.C., Virginia, Maryland, up through Connecticut, Long Island, and Northeast there, where we're starting to see people get really excited about what's going on. We're starting to see bigger festivals, bigger shucking competitions, oysters being requested at more things, and it's kind of nice to see. So we're a little bit behind over here where you guys are over there, but it's a fun growing process for us to make that and put that into the spotlight.
Is it more of like a marketing thing that you guys have to do different, or is it?
So there's a couple things. There's more raw bars popping up. There's more oysters in restaurants that haven't had oysters before. On top of that, you're seeing that marketing. Part of it is the getting it in people's face and the education side of it. So we have people come into the restaurants. The restaurant that I'm working at, Fanny Bay Oyster Bar, and you got some people who love oysters. You have people, I hate oysters. Well, why? Well, they're gross. And trying to debunk that myth that it's not that slimy thing that you think of and it's disgusting and everybody hates. It's not that stereotypical snot in a shell. It's got a great flavor, great texture, all that kind of stuff. So we get people in who reluctantly try their first oyster or their second oyster, and the first one they had was 25 years ago. And you start to see this light bulb click, or this light bulb switch on, and people are like, oh, man, this is kind of cool. And then on top of that, we're big into sustainability over here, especially in the west coast of Canada, all of Canada, and the west coast in general, talking about the right ways of doing things and how to make the system better and all that kind of stuff. So there's this education side of it, this conversation with people about why oysters are so important. It's getting oysters into the spotlight. So there's a bunch of little factors that we're working on slowly to sort of create this culture around oysters and why they're so great.
Yeah, I love to see that light bulb go off and people are like, you know what, this is really not that bad. Could I have another?
Dare I say good? Yeah, it's pretty impressive to see those guys when they first happen. Some of them, it's always fun to me because you see those ones who are so hell bent on never liking an oyster, and they have that one, and you can see the light bulb click, but they want to be so proud of their decision that no, I'm never going to have another oyster. It's terrible. And then you see them 2-3 days later, it's like, yeah, it was actually pretty good. I like them a lot.
So you talked a little bit about the sustainability. How is it different from the Chesapeake Bay, or what are you guys doing?
In terms of what we're doing differently, there's a couple small things in terms of farming practices. On the Chesapeake, they sort of lay the cages towards the bottom of the river and the watershed there, whereas most of ours are suspended. So there's little farming things in and out, as far as I understand, that are slightly different back and forth. The sustainability in the Chesapeake, you've got the Oyster Restoration Project, and up through New York, the Billion Oyster Project, which are doing great things. Over here, we don't have anything like that happening yet, but it's important for us to talk to people about not just oysters are part of the conversation of sustainability. It's oysters, mussels, clams, putting wild oysters back on beaches, putting those beach oysters back out there so they can clean the water, and not having people walk by and decide that this looks great, I'm going to eat a bunch of oysters off this beach. So there's that. Once again, we're going back to that education side of thing. And then with the sustainability, making sure we're taking out what we're putting in and leaving it for Mother Nature as well. So it's not just oysters. Like I said, it's oysters, mussels, clams, gooey duck, even some of the fishing practices in terms of having little sanctuaries for rockfish, or being careful what we're doing with salmon and things along that nature. So it all falls into that bigger picture of sustainability. But with oysters, it's making sure that we're delivering a good product, a great product, a farm product that is of the top quality that only helps the environment. So in terms of differences, I think everybody, as far as I know, everybody I've talked to in North America, it's pretty focused on the same end goal. It's just the way we get there is slightly different.
So do you guys use any wild oysters, or is that even a thing anymore?
Not a thing over here. I haven't seen any wild oysters. However, you can sort of argue that, like the Fanny Bay oysters are beach oysters. Sawmill Bay has some beach oysters as well. So for us, the beach oysters, when we take it, and it's loose. It's not in a cage. They sort of section off different parts of the beach. Tide washes over, and then we come back and either dig them out by hand or sift through anything along those ways. So that's as close as we're going to probably get to true wild oysters. We still control what's going on. We still control the beaches that they're on. We still test them regularly, make sure that there's no PSP, Vibrio, red tide, anything along those lines. But it's a little bit more of a controlled wild oyster. But other than that, everything else is fairly traditional, I guess, more of the traditional style of farming, where we have the cages, and depending on what type of oyster and what type of farming process, there's different cages doing different things, creating different shapes in the oyster shells, and mechanically tumbling versus naturally tumbling and stuff like that. So
that's fancy.
Yeah, we often say when people are like, so what are the differences between oysters, and how in depth do you want us to go?
So I know here in DC, it's a lot of farm to table going on. Like, the restaurants get their oysters directly from the oyster farmer. Is it a lot of that going on? Or is it more
yes and no. So we call it tied to table over here. So the exact same thing. Farm to plate, tied to table, whatever you want to call it. We do that. So the nice thing about working for Fanny Bay is the oyster bar is owned and operated by the farm. So we get our stuff shipped directly to us from the farm. We also do a retail and wholesale division. So when I was at another restaurant before I moved to Fanny Bay, I was buying it directly from Fanny Bay's people. Same thing when the other big one, there's another couple of farms that I used, and it was coming straight from Sawmill Bay, Effingham, through Sawmill Bay went straight from them. Effingham came through a sustainable vendor that they're talking about. Like they bring it in from them and ship directly to the restaurant based off of what the restaurant orders. So they're not ordering a surplus and it's sitting around. It's straight farm to plate, tied to table, and with these guys sort of facilitating that. So there's a couple different vendors throughout the city that primarily deal with making sure the shellfish is fresh. When we start talking about getting things from back east, whether it be Prince Edward Island, New Brunswick, anywhere down through the States, we use a vendor to sort of bring that in because they take care of the paperwork and making sure that it's all good. It's easier to get an oyster from Canada to the United States than from the United States to Canada because we have a lot more regulatory issues that we like to talk about, that we don't like to talk about, but that are in place.
So you work for Fanny Bay. Have you done any harvesting yourself?
I haven't yet. We've been fairly busy. I've talked to a couple different people. I would love to get out and do a week out in the farm, hauling oysters and doing all that kind of stuff. I've been on a bunch of farms, like both sides of the country, or sorry, both sides of the continent, I should say. So I know the process. I just haven't myself had the time yet to get out there and start hauling shells. So Effingham, Sawmill Bay, Fanny Bay. There's we use Cushies out of Desolation Sound. We use the Fanny Bay is the northern side of the company, and our sister company is Taylor Shellfish down through Seattle, Washington State area. So we have a great amount of oysters that we can pull from that give us a nice look. At any given point in time, we have 4 of the 5 species readily available to us on the East Coast or on the West Coast. We've got your Kumamotos, we have Olympias, which are absolutely fantastic, but they're fairly rare. We obviously have the Pacifics, and we have the Virginicas, both from the East Coast, and there's one farm that's doing, in Taylor Shellfish Family, that's doing the East Coast oyster grown on the West Coast, which gives you a pretty unique flavor.
Can you talk a little bit about the flavor profiles on the different oysters, just the ones that you guys use?
Yeah, of course, yeah. So the way we talk about it is, like I said, we've got generally 4 out of the 5 oysters. The ones we don't have are the European flats, but the Fanny Bay is I think your quintessential British Columbian oyster. You're getting a good amount of minerality right down the middle, with some celery on the back end, salt in the front end. That's really popular, known around the world. We have Coochie, which is another very popular oyster. It's mechanically tumbled, so when you pick up a Coochie, it feels like a golf ball. You're getting with that, you're getting a nice buttery texture with a great amount of flavor. It's a fan favorite for sure, because it's one of those oysters that's not too big, not too small. It's perfect for a lot of people, and it's one of the ones we go to when it's a first-time oyster eater. Another one that's obviously really popular around the world is the Kumamoto. Kumamoto being its own species from Japan. With that, you get a super bright cucumbery flavor, and it's a great oyster. Some of the oyster aficionados sort of turn away from the Kumamoto because it is a milder flavor. It doesn't have as much punch as a lot of the other oysters, but it's still a great oyster. It's still widely coveted around here, anyways, and it's a big fan favorite. The one thing I say to shuckers that I shuck with is make sure that those guys get in the front of the palate, the first oysters you try, because they will get lost when you go to a saltier oyster. The way I try to plate is mild to wild in terms of brine and flavors like that, so that it's like a wine tasting. You don't start with a Cab Merlot and then go to a Chardonnay. Speaking of flavors, that's sort of the way I like to plate it, but the Kumamotos are great. The Olympias are actually they're the native oyster to the Pacific Northwest, and I think there's only 1 or 2 farms that still do it out of Washington State. And you're getting a tiny oyster. They're a real pain to farm. So at any given point in time, the water gets too warm or too cold, you lose an entire crop. They're just moody. And with those things, they grow at an incredibly slow rate. So you have one about the size of a quarter, and that's a 5-6-year-old oyster. They're tiny. They're fun to shuck because they are so tiny. You have to be really careful, really delicate with them. But they have a coppery, earthy flavor with hints of smoke from time to time throughout them. So it's a very unique oyster. Another couple favorites of mine, personally, we've got the Shigoku. The Shigoku is arguably, like I said, one of my favorites. The Shigoku, the bigger version of that would be the Fat Bastard, and the biggest version would be the Grand Cru. So they have three sizes based off of age within the Shigoku family. And with that, you're getting a minimal to medium amount of minerality, bookended by salt and celery with hints of cucumber. It's a great oyster, and I think it's really readily available. It's got a beautiful teardrop-shaped shell. They're fun to shuck, and they're just amazing oyster. We've got a new one that's just come out of the Sunshine Coast in British Columbia, called the Sunseeker. So it's been around. It started as a hobby farm for one of the Fanny Bay farmers, and he goes up there. Only access is by float plane. There's no drive-in, drive-out. There's no electricity. There's none of that kind of stuff. And it's actually really unique in how they farm it. So they use lines with buoys between the cages, and they use round cages. So the oysters actually sit on the surface. Every time a wave comes, because of the round cages, they get tumbled automatically. And because they sit on the surface, that's where the sunlight hits the water. When the sunlight hits the water, that's where you get your algae growth. Algae growth means more food. So what you're getting is you're getting a salty oyster on the front end with a melon sweetness on the back end. So it's a really cool oyster from that standpoint. A couple others that we always like to talk about. The Matakis are very similar to the Coochies. Great oyster, mechanically tumbled. We have the Totten Virginicas were the ones that I was talking about. We get an East Coast oyster, Virginica species, grown on the West Coast. So you get similar salt content to your East Coast oysters, to your Blue Points, your Rappahannocks, your Whitestone, true Chesapeake stuff. You're getting that higher level of salt content. But because it's grown over here, you get some more of the East or the West Coast algae through that they're eating. So you get this sweetness and this cucumbery flavor that you're not getting over there. So it's a really unique oyster, and they're all, when they come in, they come in great, and they're an amazing oyster. So those are probably the big name ones that we have over here, especially throughout the Fanny Bay family, that we shuck on a regular basis. At any given point in time, we have 6 to 10 oysters on our bed that we're shucking every night. So there's a wide range of flavors, and it can be pretty exciting for people who are coming in to see us, and even people we have them available, like I said, for retail or wholesale. So for people who want to come in, go into a barbecue, or just hanging out, who want to shuck them at home too.
So one thing, I can see why I wanted to interview, because you know it all.
It's learning all the time. It's part of the education that I need in order to be able to put oysters on the pedestal and make everybody else see and realize how amazing these things are. So it's diving into books, talking to guys, just picking brains like crazy to try to see what's going on, how it's going across the oyster community. So
out of all of those, do you have one that you like shucking more than the other?
Honestly, it depends on the day. It really does. I obviously, like I said earlier, we run into some issues when I have a really fluted shell. So those beach oysters that have the big ribs and the big sort of grooves on the front of the shell there, those can cause me a little bit of issues. So when we're going through those, I tend to run a little bit issue. But there's other days where I'm banging through them and it's fun and it's easy. It all really depends. It depends on the time of year too, because as you know, certain times where you have a new calcium growth on a shell, and I mean, and no matter what you try to do, you're still getting some grit in there just because the shell's breaking, or at that adductor muscle, it's pulling the shell off, and so it all really depends on what's going on and why, or sorry, what's going on with the oyster. It really dictates how well they're going to be shucked.
So basically, what I got out of that is sometimes you want to hit it from the back, and sometimes you want to hit it from the front. I won't admit it to the guys I work with, because I'm the only guy in the city who stabs. So when when I first showed up, everybody was looking at me, "You're shucking wrong." No, you guys are all shucking wrong. Who goes from the back? And so since then, we sort of softened on each other's stances a little bit. But I will shuck from the hinge from time to time when I can't find it at the front. I mean, there's a million or 1,000 million ways to skin a cat, and it's the same thing with oysters. It doesn't really matter how you open it, as long as you're opening it and it's clean and it's a beautiful oyster. I saw on your Instagram account that you entered into a shucking competition.
Yeah, so we've done a couple this year. I did my first one last year. Bikers for Autism is the name of the first one I did, and I did it again this year. It's a charity event. One of the shuckers there is an avid motorcycle rider, and wanted to give back. So he does an absolutely great job. He puts on this amazing event called Bikers for Autism, where we're starting to get traction. I think this year was the 4th year of it. I did Bikers for Autism 3 and 4 now. I think that's what it is. All the proceeds go towards the other stuff that you don't think about with autism. So a family's got to take off work, take their child to appointments and stuff like that. Well, they're not working, they're not making money. So how do these? What James does is he comes in and he helps try to fill that gap, and we do a lot of good work, I think, for them. It's a fun event. It's a great event. This year we had at the time the Canadian champ Daniel Knockins was there. He ended up winning it, and that's a great event. It comes around at the end of May every year. I think it's one you should come up to. You'd have a blast because It's a great time, great people. It looks rough, and their motto is for bikes for autism is look bad, do good. So you're walking into what looks like a motorcycle club, and and everybody's there, but it's all about love for the kids and having fun and shucking a bunch of oysters and making people happy. So that's the first big one I did. Since then, we've done a couple more. We've actually got one on this weekend coming up in Whistler. Barefoot Bistro's hosting the World Invitational Oyster Shucking Competition that I've been entered into. Obviously, nerves are pretty fried. It's hard to stay calm, but it's going to be a great experience. There's some rumor about who's going to be there. Eamon Clark, who's Rodney Clark's son from the Rodneys in Toronto and Alberta. He's coming over to be the head judge. He won it last year. He's placed third in the world this year, current Canadian champ now. There's going to be rumor that Anti's going to be there, the Estonian champ and the current world champ. So there's a lot of pedigree that's going to be up there, and so this is the biggest one I think I've ever done. And it's a little nerve-wracking, obviously. I get a little bit of the jitters, a little bit of the shakes. The adrenaline goes pretty hard, but hopefully we go up there and do well, learn a lot, and yeah. So that's sort of the competitions that I've been in.
Man, I'm not gonna say anything because I don't want to get to your nerves, but that's some crazy competition.
Yeah.
Is there anything that you're doing like mentally, like now, to kind of prep you, or do you have like a to-do list before your competitions? Yeah,
for me, it's about being trying to keep as normal of a schedule as possible. Try to keep as relaxed as possible. It's a lot of the deep breaths, just like just big sigh, shake it off. It's going to be a lot of I don't actually like shucking a lot before a shucking competition, like the day before or the day of. I know that some of the guys I've shucked against love to go in and blast out 30 oysters and get the kinks out. I like to come in. I don't like to race beforehand. I just like to sit there and relax and just get used to the oysters, get used to the knife in my hand, pop a couple shells and sort of see where we're at, see how the oysters are reacting, and look for little things that I need to keep an eye on, like we talked about, maybe some softer shell, some different edges, all that kind of stuff. But this week so far, it's been let's just try to stay calm. We're not there yet. It's making sure we're booking the hotels because it is a little bit of a ways up. So it's just right now crossing our T's, dotting our I's. The day of, there's going to be booze involved. There's going to be some drinking, as there usually is for oyster competitions. The other than that, it's trying to find a right balance between taking a little bit of the edge off and not getting too drunk. And that's sort of the way that the shucking competitions tend to be over here, anyways. Is you just wanna be nice and loose, but not too loose. So
that, my friend, is easier said than done.
Yeah, fair enough. It is. It's tricky because every now and then, like you get a little bit too far.
All right, cool. So, what's your most memorable experience that you've had, during your shucking journey? I'm sure you forgot a lot from all the drinking, but
yeah.
Ones that you
you know what? There's the whole process has been pretty amazing. Like I remember the first oyster I shucked, and that was pretty cool. I remember the first oyster I shucked as a real shucker, not just as somebody at home. I remember the first time I stabbed myself and cut myself, thinking I was a great shucker, and I got a little cocky, and there we go, pop, and I got a little cut in my hand. So on top of that, I mean, you and I together have shucked a bunch, and just I think probably the biggest thing that I like about shucking is the camaraderie that all of us shuckers have. When we shuck against each other, I mean, we obviously want to beat each other, but as soon as we put that last oyster on the plate, we're brothers. It's a fraternity, brothers and sisters of the shell. And it sounds corny and cliche, but you can go to any city in the world and you're a shucker, and there's somebody who's going to say, "Hey, you need a place to stay. Come crash on my couch." Because it really is. It's a good group of people that are in it for the bigger picture. The bigger picture being these oysters and the love and the passion for food and shellfish and seafood and all that kind of stuff. So everything that I've done, it's making friends along the way. It's having conversations like this. It's being buddies and making fun of each other in the lighthearted ways and joking around and shucking oysters and just having that type of friendship that you build everywhere you go.
We know you shuck oysters.
Yeah.
And I know from your Instagram post you have a shuck mobile. Is that like your other hobby or?
So I have a while ago I bought a 1947 Chev pickup, and it's a daily drive. It's a project that my father and I are working on together. We want to restore it and make it a beautiful driving car that one day I would love to have, where I packed up all the stuff in the back and was able to shuck a couple events. It's a passion project. It's a hobby, working on that and driving that thing around. I do some catering stuff on my own. I'm sort of building like that Big Shucker brand. So make sure you check out Instagram Big Shucker. I'm looking at getting some hats done with my logo on it. We're going to release the logo fairly soon as well. So there'll be that stuff there, and it's just I mean, it's the car is part of the fun. You know, it's a way to get around. I want to say go fast, but it's pretty original right now, so you're going nowhere in a hurry.
Is there anything that you want to put out there, any myths or anything you want to tell the people about oysters, anything we didn't go over?
I don't know. I think the biggest thing for me with the oyster industry is get out there and try them. Find what you like. It's the easiest thing in conversation is comparing oysters to wine. There's 10,000 varietals of grapes out there. There's probably 100 to 200 farms up and down the East Coast. There's 8 to 12 farms within the Fanny Bay community. Just because you've had one oyster that you thought was kind of icky doesn't mean that they're all bad. So get out there, try oysters, talk to your shuckers. We're going to be your experts on the oysters. So have a conversation with us. We eat them every day. We have we quality control, as we like to call it. When you see a shucker throw an oyster down behind the bar there, and we're chewing away. Quality control. You got to make sure you take care of the shucker too. But get out there, try it, talk to them. Let us debunk some of these myths about oysters, so that you can come in and open up the whole world, the whole palate that you might never have known before. So that's probably the biggest thing. And other than that, like I said, just follow Big Shucker, and I'll do my shameless plug. There we are.
Hey, I don't blame you. You know I want a hat. I like trucker hats. Just throwing it out there. I'm not.
I got you. You know I got you, man.
Hey, and I do have one last question. Your most common question that you get asked, what is it?
Oh boy. So there's probably two of the big questions that I get asked behind the bar. The first one is what's the best thing to pair with an oyster? And since I've left Washington, D.C., and I've come back here, I've actually taken on bigger roles within liquor programs and beer programs and wine programs here. So I've sort of transitioned to being a shucker bartender. And my biggest thing that I tell people is the same thing with when I sell the oysters. The biggest thing is you got to find what you like. So I can give you a bunch of pairings. I love a nice dry white wine with oysters. I love beer. Obviously, I'm a big beer drinker, so nothing wrong with a lager or a pale ale or an IPA with a beer. Stouts are fantastic. We're seeing a resurgence of oyster stouts coming up, whether it's Pearl Necklace from Flying Dog down there. I believe the True Chesapeake guys, they have an oyster stout out as well. I did one last year with Strange Fellows Brewing in BC, and we're looking potentially to do another oyster stout up here. So don't shy away from coming up with crazy ideas. I've taken a wine course, a WSET wine course, and the guy who teaches it was saying, "Oh, nobody has really tannic wines with oysters, do they?" I was like, "You'd be surprised. People like what they like. There's no point in beating around it." So, for shuckers out there, anybody who shucks who listens, don't shame anybody into liking or into saying, "Well, that's the wrong pairing." You like what you like. Don't let them figure that out. Guide them into directions. Always taste it. Taste oysters. Taste beer. Do this. Do that, and make sure it pairs well. A nice cocktail would be nice. Classic cocktails that are dry, booze forward. They're always lovely with oysters. Tiki drinks. I mean, you see some crazy stuff out there. Pineapple salsa mignonette are coming out, and all these crazy things. So let's just sit back, have fun, experiment, and figure out what you like. So that's the first one, and the second one is obviously, what's the difference? What is the difference between all the oysters? And as we covered before, it's vast. We can talk about it till we put you to sleep. About what's out there and the different flavors and the different species of oysters and what's going on within those species and how the farming affects it. So those are probably the two most common questions that I get on a day-to-day basis.
Scotty, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me.
You blew my mind. I think I learned about 10 million things. Thank you.
Well, I appreciate that.
No doubt. So if you want to give a shout out of your email, your social media, you can. Just where people can follow you, see you at the Raw Bar. Yeah.
So it's Big Shucker on Instagram. That's probably the easiest way to get a hold of me. Check it out. Scotty Bordignon again. I usually just give out my Instagram. It's easy for people from around the world to get a hold of me. If you have any questions, direct message me. If you have any concerns of anything I said, if I said anything wrong, let me know. Other than that, I hope to see you guys somewhere along the line. Everybody is listening. I hope I can shuck for you one day. And Gardner, I hope we're shucking together again real soon.
Yeah, me too, man. Fun times.
For sure.
Thank you again. I'll be talking with you, man.
All right, sounds good, buddy. Thanks very much for having me.
All right, good people. So I hope you enjoyed that interview with Scotty, aka the Big Shucker. And if you're in the Fanny Bay area, look him up. He's there getting it on, shucking and jiving. So I just wanted to leave you with this little story from the other night. I was shucking at this holiday party, and I don't know. It's a story, but it's more of like my pet peeves. So this lady, I think she was like the event coordinator or something, and I understand she had good intentions, but like she ran her nose across the oyster bar. And, maybe it's because, she's not used to working with professional shuckers, or maybe she had a bad experience at a raw bar and she didn't want to pass that on to anybody else. Or maybe, maybe she does this at every event. But either way, I mean, it was like she was trying to search with her nose for a bad oyster. And that's kind of, I'm not going to say disrespectful, but I don't know. rubbed me the wrong way. Like, if how could a bad oyster get to the table? I don't know. I guess, like I said, maybe it could be because just a bad experience or anything. But yeah, that's just one of my pet peeves, I guess. And now I'm just on a rant. But the other one is when you're at a raw bar and you see your shuckers shucking and laughing and having a good time, and then you get your oysters and you look down and you don't know if you got shucked oysters or scrambled oysters. So I hear this a lot, and a lot of people say they just, they eat them the way they are, or they just put them to the side, or whatever. But I'm thinking, and I'm telling other people, like, why? Say something to your waiter or waitress and let them know that you're not happy with, you know, what was brought to you. Because at the end of the day, you're paying your hard-earned money, and you want good quality. So, I mean, a good chucked oyster makes the entire difference. So, it's just hard to put in words, but I'm going to try. Like, when you eat an oyster, you want it to be whole and full, and you want to break it down and break those flavors down. Not for the flavors and everything, the juices and everything to be scrambled up. And in that scrambled mess, you can have pieces of shell that you can't even see now. But anyway, on to another rant, and I'm just gonna leave that up in the air. But yeah, thank you guys for sticking with me. I'm glad you keep coming back every week, and happy holidays.